Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. I'm Sascha. This is Michael, our Modern Mystic. And today's topic is free will. What do you make of it, Michael?
So do I have free will to say what I wish?
Well, I might kick you out of the session.
Of course. So free will is an interesting topic in as much as who really has a free will.
Right.
I mean, the simple fact is if you're a Catholic, you don't have free will. If you're a Buddhist, you don't have free will.
Why
if
not?
You're any of the churches, any of the religions, because you have a belief system. And the belief system is a box. And you're in that box and you're going to act within that belief system.
But wasn't it your free decision to be in that box at first place?
Was it? Now,
Well,
how many Catholics had Catholic parents? How many Buddhists? Some choose, yes, Buddhism, because it is to be respected. But generally speaking, children tend to follow the religion of their parents. Some quit it and some join others. And so there is a degree of that. But free will, how can you have free will when you don't know who you are? How can you have free will when you think you're a physical human being? What's free about that?
but on a soul, so that's on a more or less superficial level, I would say, on a material level. But if you go to the soul level, it was free will to go down that direction, right?
I would say that's one of the things that Kabbalah is trying to take away at the moment, the free will from the soul. Even then, the soul, I mean, it depends on what age, but if you take a younger soul, as we are here, we have free will, but we have free will. A soul, for instance, has fears. You know, when we feel fear, that is deeply in the soul. It's embedded in the soul. An enlightened soul has no fear. Now, any soul that has fear doesn't have free will because it's going to act more from fear than anything else. Free will is like a lot of people say, we want freedom again. You know, we want to end this thing, so let's take back our freedom. And I think it's a wonderful idea, except we've never had any. We've never really had any. We've been programmed all the way. And when you're in a program, what free will do you have?
Let's try and define free will. As far as I'm concerned, I would say free will is if someone can decide the course of their actions independent of any outer influence, independent of any interference by this, right? Would that be free will?
But there's no such thing as independent of anything else.
I don't know, but just generally just trying to define it. Just
they've got parents, they've got a belief system that there is, you can't, it's a great question, but it's not a reality. It's an illusion. If anybody had no prior interference, no prior attachments, you know, just an emotional attachment, goodbye free will.
But then again, I would argue that at the core of our being, or let's just say at when we were created, there must have been, as a consequence of unconditional love, which we talked about also being the foundation of everything, there must have been free will going with it in terms of, okay, you do whatever you choose and you learn through the consequences of what you choose. And then down the road, those choices became less and less obvious, and souls became less and less conscious of those decisions. And that's why it seems that there's no free will, but I think at the core it is free will, right? Would I be right or would I be wrong according to you?
I don't agree with you. I don't think it would be right. Let's put it this way. When you finally reach the place, if you're saying you've become enlightened, you feel unconditional love, you're emotionally balanced, and you find the place of free will, it's a joke because you already surrendered your will to all that is, to supreme creation. And free will is really like the game that ego wants to play, that we have free will. But it's like a rose, when it's in a bud, it just flowers. And you could say, well, is it free will to go from the bud to the flower? Now, we have fears, and humanity's been in a bud for a long time, and too afraid to flower because the flower will get criticized. And so, you know, I found that could I stop doing this if I wanted to? Now, if I wanted to, yes, I could stop doing this, but inside, I would know I was going against the flow or the current of life.
But that's only because you are aligned with the flow of life and with the divine flow of things.
Then I don't have free will, because I surrendered my will to that current of life.
I would argue that it is your free choice, your free will decision to act according to what you feel in deep inside, which is then bringing your actions and your life in line with your deeper reality. Whereas most people don't have that awareness, and they use their free will to do all kinds of crazy things.
I would probably allow that argument. I'm not quite sure I followed it, but I think I could allow that argument. I mean, okay, I'm playing the devil's advocate here and saying there's no such thing. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, I look at most of humanity, and the mass of people really don't have free will. They think they do. They don't have freedom. They think they do, and they want their freedoms back.
I agree to that. But
free will, you have free will to go shopping. You have free will to say, "Oh, I will pick this lovely shirt." You have free will to have that put on it. You have a lot of those little freedoms, but in the end, they don't add up to a stack of beans.
I agree to that. But yet, I would say that on a soul level, every human being has free will and operates under the premise of free will. Would you agree?
I think you would like to believe that. That's how you would like it to be.
No, that's my feeling. I mean, that's yeah.
Okay, you think every soul has free will. Do you think, therefore, a soul has got the choice to say, I'm never going to incarnate again anywhere. I'm going to stay in the spiritual realm forever?
No, they don't. I mean,
then there's a lack of free will there.
No, that is already a consequence of their free will being acted out, because they chose to go through certain densities, and that's why they now are bound to go through the consequences of their actions, and that's why but it's already a consequence of their initial choice to move away from their alignment.
So which was the first initial choice?
That is a good question. What do you want to speak to that, Mike?
Me and my big mouth. Let's just say that supreme creation is supreme creation, absolute love, absolute intelligence is a vast degree of energy, and energy creates. All energy has information. And so when you get to something like the supreme creation, there is creation taking place all the time. You could say just streams of energy moving out. And those streams of energy hold the potential. They all hold a potential. And from those potential, and I'm having to use words that aren't the real right words, but you could say, like, to describe a snowflake as a flake, you could say that many of those flakes begin out of that stream of energy, many flakes, like snowflakes, emerge, and they each have a potential. Some have a potential to reach humanity and beyond. Some have the potential of adding to a planet in the minerals kingdom, and on and on and on. Somewhere we do have, yes, I'll stop playing the awkward one. We do have a degree of free will, but there's no absolute free will until you're absolutely free.
Yep. Okay, I can agree to that.
Thank you. I'm glad you can, because if you have absolute freedom, then you have absolute free will. But in that absolute freedom, you're already part of a divinity, which is expressing in a certain way, and nothing gives you greater joy than to follow that expression.
I remember you speaking about angels not having free will, animals not having free will, humans in turn having free will, and humans having that free will being a reason of envy for many other beings who don't.
Let's put it this way: we have, I don't think I said that, we have the freedom to create ourselves. We're doing it whether we think we are or not. Everybody's creating themselves, which is ironic when you think about how many people don't like themselves, and that's who they're creating.
I mean, let's
yeah. Not liking yourself continues that creation. So angels, when I say they have no free will, I would rather say that they follow divine will. Now, you could say to me, well, they follow divine will of their own free will. Now, I don't know how that would work out, but they follow divine will. Now, that could be their free will has made that choice, but that's how it works. Animals follow a biological program. So a rabbit doesn't have the freedom to halfway through its life to start climbing trees, right? Because it's not what a rabbit does. On the other hand, we don't have the freedom halfway through our life to just suddenly open our wings and start flying, because we also have, defined limits. Now, let me put this to you. You're talking about free will, and I'm getting warmed up now. We all have emotional borders and boundaries to our life. And as you know, I've written and spoken about breaking those. How Pan got me to break my emotional boundaries and borders. Now, I had free will, if you like, within those borders and boundaries, but outside of those borders and boundaries, there's no free will at all. So you could say, as a Catholic, a person has free will within the borders and boundaries of Catholicism, but they don't have that freedom outside, because that's not what they do, because they don't believe it. Of course, in fact, most people take no notice whatsoever of the rules of Catholicism, but everybody is imprisoned in the borders and boundaries of their mental and emotional, mental beliefs and emotional attachments.
Would you say
within that framework, they have a degree of free will?
Right. But would you say, though, that before being embedded in those frameworks, whatever those frameworks are, having made the decision or not having made the decision to go down a specific route of evolution and experience specific things, whether they're dark or light or whatever they are, that would be free will as well, right? I mean, at some point, let's say a young soul just goes through experiences and then experiences itself and the world around it through those experiences. And then making decision based on those experiences, that is free will, right? Because the soul then decides, okay, now that experience feels this way, this feels different, now I'm going to choose this and whatever.
But if we're talking about humans, within our that framework, there is the subconscious, and the subconscious holds very strongly the program of all our pain and suffering.
And there's no real free will within that.
Our fears and our survival. Now, if free will would be you're walking through a city, and everybody's running towards you and past you, and they're screaming out tsunami. And as you look ahead, you see a massive tsunami. Now, it would be using free will to walk toward the tsunami and say, now I choose love. Now I'm moving on to the next dimension. I will no longer express from fear, I choose love. That would be a very powerful display of free will, which will be rewarded. You may lose your body, you may not. You might ascend with such an act. But everybody who runs, they didn't have free will. They simply ran because they're terrified.
In that regard, I would consider your basic spiritual teaching of in every moment of your life, you create the content and direction of every moment of your life to be the perfect expression of free will as on a soul level to be expressed, right?
It does speak of the freedom, but again, you're free within your program.
Right. So, and you can only live that spiritual truth if you manage to break out of your program.
That's exactly right. Now, at a certain stage, you chose to break through that program. At a certain stage, you decided you wanted to move on your spiritual path. that was a choice. Maybe it was made in a previous incarnation, but that was a choice. But a choice doesn't always reflect free will.
I agree.
But it reflects the growing consciousness of that person.
So we could agree.
On the other hand, it does reflect free will to say I'm leaving behind the indoctrination I grew up in and I'm going to go this way.
As with everything, it's a paradox.
Every truth is always a paradox. The closer you get to truth, this is why Jesus told parables. Yeah. Because if he just said it the way it is, people wouldn't get it. So he told parables. They still didn't get it. I tend to rather make people face the paradox. In other words, if you swing the sword blade first is sharp, but as you bring it back, it will kill you equally effectively.
I think the nice thing about paradoxes and parables is that you cannot understand them with your intellect. You have to go beyond your intellect and you have to kind of feel them and embrace them.
No, the sound, what do they call them? The sound of one hand clapping. What is that? What do they call those? They have a name.
Oh yeah, haikus? No.
I don't know by that name. Anyway, you know, then people will spend months thinking about this, trying to understand it, which makes me laugh.
Are you talking about that Japanese word?
No, not the haiku. That's four-line verses.
Okay.
4-line verses. No, there's a word, simple word for these. I know it, but I can't think of it at the moment. It's like people say, but to be clever, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people ponder the chicken and the egg. The answer is very obvious to me. The answer is consciousness came first. And the chicken and the egg came well after the consciousness. And so with every one of those, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? You don't think about hands and clapping. You move your consciousness elsewhere.
Right. So summarizing what we spoke about so far, we could say, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, on a deeper level, or maybe on a soul level, or on a creation level, on a supreme creation level, there is free will being given to human souls.
And now that's a whole different thing, yes.
And then as we go through human experiences in the course of time, non-time, we then usually become, maybe that's not true for every soul, but in general, we become more and more embedded in the cascades of all the energy mud that we've been creating. We create those bodies around us. And then that free will becomes less and less free because we have accumulated so much heavy, dense energy around us that free will is never being exercised on a superficial level.
Go to the top of the class. That's very good. Okay. We were given free will and freedom, and we gradually imprisoned ourselves. And then there's a point, certainly with enlightenment, then gradually you find the way out of the prison, and that's very much a process of letting go and surrender. You know, like somebody said, what do I want for Christmas, or what I want for my birthday? I generally, you know, I say, I don't really have wants. So then they'll go through things that I might like, and I say, yeah, well, that would be nice, or that would be nice. But as for want, I don't sort of live much with wants now. And that's one of the tricks, you know, in this whole thing of free will. People have desire, and I've heard spiritual teachers make me cringe when they say that you've got a desire. Desire will bring it to you. And I mean, even the British, ancient Brits knew that which you desire the most will enslave you in the end. And that's a long way from freedom. And desire is the first one you shoot down.
Now,
or you use desire as a catalyst, and then you quietly strangle it and continue your journey.
Beautiful, pacific image. Okay.
I'm not quite so passive as I thought I was, because I've really been enjoying the online conflict with with Facebook and all them, and banging the drums and standing up and speaking what I feel, opposing what's going on with no anger and no pure peace. I found that inside as a spiritual warrior. I thought he'd gone.
I think if we want to make a brief connection to the current global situation, what we see is the desire to suppress that expression of free will even further than it already is through suppression of freedom of speech. You know, if you consider free will to say whatever you like, and then suddenly you have those platforms and governments and so forth censoring, then that is a direct threat to the expression of free will, right?
Exactly. And I will stand up there and defend it to the best of my ability. I will stand up and defend free will and freedom, even if I know nobody's got any. I will defend what they think
Wonderful.
is their freedom.
Before we go a little bit deeper, which I still like to do, we have some minutes, I'd like to close off the human thing with the question, what can you do? Which, as always, I like to ask this question because it gives some practical advice to people. What can you do to become freer, to go more into your space of free will beyond your boxes? What is a good first step?
A good first step toward freedom is surrender. If you surrender once, your world gets bigger, not smaller, it gets bigger. As you begin to surrender, surrendering once, surrendering to be anything other than who you are. We need to express more of who we are and less of who we are not. And when you consider that you're a magnificent, etc., 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 then expressing yourself with clearly in your words, you have a very deep and loving respect for yourself. Some people will be threatened and get out of your life because they'll just call you arrogant and conceited. Wiser ones will stay and use it to help lever them towards a greater freedom. And so the step toward freedom is, first of all, a surrender and a vulnerability, an enormous vulnerability. You're far more free. Of all the defenses, of all the arguments, you just put yourself into everybody else's energy. And so basically freedom is having your own field of energy where there's nobody's field of energy in it that is impairing your growth. Now, every person you argue with, every person you take to court, every person you've got problems with, their energy fields connect with you and they are curtailing your freedom. You're being held by your energy of disagreement with them. And so you gradually release people, all the people, of course we come back to love, all the people you feel anger with, you just trade that in, allow yourself to feel love for them, or good feelings towards them. And if it's not love, it doesn't matter. But the animosity is gone, the anger, the connections that are negative have all gone. And so a surrender, a vulnerability, and trust. Trust is an incredible freedom.
Would you agree?
You trust yourself. There's nothing else out there. So you trust self because you know that you are the world, you are humanity, that you are God, and you trust that. And that beats prayer any day. And because prayer is saying, I have wants and I don't trust. And so I'm praying to somebody to fill it in, fix it. And so those are steps towards a far, far greater freedom and toward free will.
Thank you. Would you agree if I said, unless you love yourself unconditionally and therefore love everybody and everything unconditionally, there's no freedom?
I don't see how you could have freedom and not do that. because yeah, I would say yes. I'd say that's a very good statement. That when you've reached that unconditional love, you have a freedom, because what other people think of you, you just don't connect with it. It doesn't matter. They're okay. They're free. They can think what they like. You don't have the ego investment to defend yourself.
So ironically, to close this whole thing, ironically, free will for humans is the pathway towards experiencing unconditional love. And when you do, the concept and free will, there's no need for free will, because you are in line with unconditional love. And you've, like you said in the beginning, you would not.
It's like what I said of crossing the gulf of separation. It took me 15 years to cross it. And when I cross it, I laugh, because there isn't one. It's just a concept in the brain, and it's in a human concept. And it's the same with freedom. You walk what you think is the path of freedom, which is really the want of desire and everything to get more spiritual. Along the way, you quietly strangle desire. You let go of attachments. You chain that to a tree and leave it with a tree. You just leave those things behind. And then when you find this unconditional love and trust, you laugh, because you realize that you've never been free, and you're certainly not free now. And but you're free to not want to be free anymore, because the wants have gone. And so freedom is a lovely song, and I will defend freedom to the utmost. But secretly and deeply, I realize that it's more of a concept than the reality. But one day we will experience that freedom. That will be there one day, an absolute and complete freedom.
Also,
we're still on that journey.
Also, maybe as a last comment before we close, I feel like free will on the soul level was the greatest gift and the greatest expression of unconditional love in the first place that could have been given to humans, right? And
well, we are an expression of unconditional love. So we have the potential of freedom and free will is in every human being. Somewhere way back, we decided it was too much liberation. Let's put ourselves in a prison. But one day, and I don't consider I'm completely free, because my free will is given over to life.
Right.
But then again, I am life. And so there's the paradox. You are life. Life is not an outside of self event. Life is an inside of self event, but self not being the physical body, self being the vast energy that is humanity. And so it's all paradoxes in paradoxes.
There's lots of paradoxes connected, right?
And while we try to understand, there's no freedom.
I agree. And also, I think another observation, now this needs to be the last one, is that the extent of freedom that we are able to give to people around us in terms of letting them do whatever they like is a good measure of how deeply we are embedded in unconditional love ourselves, right?
I grew up in a generation of parents who were very strict with their kids. I was medium strict, but nothing like my parents. I noticed my kids, they give their kids so much freedom, they're lost. They don't know what to do. A child needs borders and boundaries, because within them it's safe. And so I watch people today, young parents, give so much freedom. The kids are becoming introvert and terrified, because they don't see their borders and boundaries. They don't feel safe.
And here's a good topic for a next session.
Their consciousness has not reached the place where they can accept that. Most of them then turn to electronics, and they create their own boundaries and borders with electronic toys. They don't go out and play in nature. Whereas my parents gave me freedom to go and get lost in the woods. And I did several times, or drown in the river, today's parents, heaven forbid, they wouldn't allow such a thing.
I agree to all you just said. What I meant with my statement before was maybe more on an adult level, that where our relationships with others are so many times defined by our expectations of how they should behave, what they should do, and I feel like the measure of ourselves being rooted in unconditional love is often how much freedom we can give those adult people around us and just say, okay, you choose however you want to choose. And the more we don't do this, it's like a measure of, okay, we really still are very far away from unconditional love.
Yeah, that's probably true, because I find that love can say no very clearly with no anger and no problems. So if somebody asked me to do something like, would I go online? I have no problem saying no for a year, at least
Or a couple
year.
of years.
And I had no problem with that at all, because there was no anger. I understood where you were, and that was good. And no, I don't want to do that. And eventually,
It was your free will.
I eventually decided myself that I will begin to explore what that was like.
Wonderful.
And,
do you want to close? Do you want to close this with anything, or you think we've said enough and it's?
I would just close it by saying, as always, the path toward anything that offers goodness, truth, and beauty, and inner freedom and free will, is to just choose love. And if you have to, if that's an effort to choose love, then freely don't choose love. You get what's left. But choosing love to me is like a statement of freedom. And being able to choose love is a great freedom, because a lot of people, it's difficult because somebody might be watching. And they can't say to somebody, I love you, because somebody might be watching and listening.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It's been 35 minutes, I think.
Okay.
35 minutes with a modern mystic, that's good too. I think people don't mind the extra 5 minutes. Thank you everybody for listening. And as always, make sure to share this video if you like it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button below for Michael's channel. Make sure to leave a thumbs up and comment. And we appreciate you listening, and thank you very much.
Feel free to share it with as many people as you can.
Okay, see you next time, Michael.
I'll see you then.